Hey, what's up, everybody? We have a new YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe right now. Leave a comment on the video. Share it with your friends. It's also a podcast, 3 and Out, wherever you listen with me, John Middlekauff, Apple, Spotify. We have you covered, as well as thevolume.com. We have merch. Check out. I got 3 and Out hats right now. Thevolume.com. Search the podcast. Buy some merch. Okay, let's dive into the mailbag. Very, very easy to get involved. At John Middlekauff, Instagram, fire in those DMs, 2 Fs for the mailbag. A lot of people are saying Russell Wilson to the Steelers. My question, why not Cousins? Well, first and foremost, money. Kirk Cousins, if he's healthy, is a very, very expensive player. He does not have a contract. 0. So if you want Kirk Cousins services, I mean, you're talking probably at cheapest, like 2 years, $80 million. More than likely, he gets like 3 years, $120 million. $70, $80 million guaranteed. Like he's an expensive asset. Russell Wilson is the opposite. He's cheap. Well, not for the Broncos. They're paying him a lot of money to go away. But if you want his services, I don't know. League minimum is based on, like, he's been in the league however many years now, 12, 13 years, is based on service time. So his league minimum is different than some guys' league minimum. But his league minimum is cheap, right? His league minimum, I'd guess like $1.5 million, $1 million, whatever the number is. It's low. You can pay him that, and the Broncos can pay the $39 million, and you got a $40 million quarterback. Now, I know he's not a $40 million quarterback, but my point is, you can just get Russell Wilson for nothing. I think that's a big, big reason. My theory has been, too, they are just not, like, think about the players they have. TJ, Cam Hayward, Minkah Fitzpatrick. Like, it's a lot of serious cats. What's his, the other pass rusher? Hightower? Crazy. I'm like out of the football season loop, and they've been out of sight, out of mind for a while. They got a lot of high-level dudes, man. And starts with Mike. I actually think it's like, Russell, they want to take a chance on you. You know you'll be the starting quarterback because Kenny Pickett's not beating you out. I actually think it makes a lot of sense. I don't understand how a team could give up a second or third-round pick for Justin Fields. Mainly because you're not only giving up picks, but having to pick up his option and potentially pay him next season. And he's not very good. Is it just social media thinking he's worth that much, or will a dumb team actually make that move? Well, all it takes is one, right? It just takes one team to value a guy / be desperate. I said this when I reacted to Russell Wilson getting cut. The worst part of the move for the Broncos wasn't that they traded for a quarterback. It's they traded for a quarterback when they were really, really desperate. And when you make enormous moves in life out of desperation, it's when you get in trouble. And to me, that is where they found themselves. Denver wanted Rodgers. Rodgers kind of played them a little bit. Maybe he was interested. Then he stayed in Green Bay, and they were like, holy shit, we now have Hackett. We really need a quarterback. John Schneider had been trying to get rid of him for years. They gave up 2 1s, 2 2s, and they gave him $160 million when he was already under contract. So if you trade for Justin Fields, like, here would be my offer if I was a team. I'd give you like a 4th-round pick, and I would not pick up the 5th-year option. That's what I would do. I'd give you a day 3 pick, and I would not plan on picking up the 5th-year option. And if he's unreal, it was worth it. I took a low flyer on him. We'll figure out the extension after, or franchise tag him or whatever. And if he's not good, whatever. But I could not give a pick of value for Justin Fields. And I'm someone that loved the guy as a prospect. But part of being like, once you watch a player, after 3 or 4 years, you kind of know. Like his value has changed. Baker Mayfield, once upon a time, number 1 overall pick. Had some pretty good moments in Cleveland. Then it started going bad. Then he got cut. Then he went to the Panthers. I'm like, I do not see it. Now you watch him on the Bucs, you're like, that's a solid player. But the Bucs paid $4 million for it. regarding Fugazi Friday. I'm in Miami, South Beach, for a conference. I went out to dinner, and there was a baked-in 20% gratuity. Fine, whatever. It's a big party. But then they had the audacity to ask for a tip on top of the 20%. I'm happy to tip well, but asking for extra points on top of a good tip is just too much. I thought it might be that particular restaurant, but all 3 nights it happened. All different places on South Beach. Fugazi, the tipping culture, man. We need to rein that bad boy in. You know the way Saban and all the coaches are talking about the transfer portal and NIL? It's out of control. We need to corral the situation. We need to put some parameters. Tipping culture. I did it the other day. It's like, I just want to, sometimes, listen, I don't overreact. Like, if you just make your own coffee, you will save a lot of money, which is kind of true, especially if you shop for coffee at Costco. Sometimes you're in the car, you're like, I want to just Starbucks cold brew with a little vanilla cold foam, right? So you'll pay the $5 or $6. But then she hands you if you do the drive-through and they give you that look, it's like, lady, I just got a $6 coffee, which I fucking literally drove my SUV here burning gas, and you're kind of eyeballing me that I'm not going to add $1 on top of it. When it comes to the big parties, I'm with you. Like, if you get a big party in your bachelor party, whatever, and you go to a nice restaurant and the bill is 4 figures, you're going to tip the 20% or whatever. You're going to take care of them. But then to ask for a tip on top of the tip, like, where are we drawing the line? I think sometimes you just, they say, you give them an inch, they'll take a mile. I think that's what's happened. Most normal people are very supportive if you do a really good job. I think I had a DM or someone tell me this story. It was a DM. It was a guy that had a plumber over or some situation like that, electrician. And the guy fixed his job. It was like $250 to whatever he needed. The guy handed him, the ability to pay on your phone now. And it said, you want to leave a tip? Like, no, bro. I just paid $300 for 45 fucking minutes for you to replace a couple things in my wall. Like, I paid you for that. Do I get a tip just because, hey, Middlekauff, really liked your podcast, man? Where's a tip jar? Like, not everything deserves a tip. Some of the stuff you're just paid to do. I think we're losing our way. I'm a good tipper. All these GMs of the combine look hungover as hell. Were you partying with them? I did not party with any general managers. I bet it's probably 50-50. I think years ago, even 5-6 years ago, a lot more coaches went, and you could see them out and about drinking. I'm talking head coaches. I do think that's a little more hit or miss now, the head coaches and the GM. And I think a lot has to do with the camera phone. Like, no one wants to be on a camera phone. I think I was out and about with a lot of assistant coaches. I was sick the first couple days, and the second day the last day when I was leaving, a lot of assistant coaches were out and about. And again, out and about, you've been grinded, long season, having a couple beers. Like, I don't know. A lot of stories about some pretty famous people getting in trouble at this event with the policemen, probably in the 2000s. I think the event has changed a lot in terms of that. A lot of women running around, some craziness. I think it's really, really mellowed out. Relative, there are a lot of, if you just walked into the JW Marriott during the week at midnight, there are a lot of famous people standing around, but it's pretty under control. I remember going when I worked there in 10, 11, and 12. It was fucking bananas. Just because, you'd be out at bars late, all-nighters. Not saying that it doesn't happen. I think it's a little more few and far between. I think a lot of these GMs, if you're watching the combine, look really tired. They're working really late. A lot of meetings with agents, a lot of meetings with people. When I asked Howie, I think he was sleeping 3 or 4 hours because you just are meeting late. You just have meetings with Drew Rosenhaus, with whoever, after your interviews. You might go meet the guy for a drink at midnight to discuss one of the players on your team. And then by the time you get home, maybe grab a bite to eat, spend a long day, you want to get up early before you do more meetings and get a workout in or something at like 6 a.m. I just don't think they're sleeping much. I think that, not saying that they're not having a cocktail here and there. My guess would be most GMs, the drinking has really, really slowed down from what it used to be at the combine. There's just too much on the line. These jobs are too valuable. It's hard to screw around. Get in on the action with Draftking Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. New customers who deposit $5 or more can get a no-sweat bet up to $1,000 back in a bonus bet. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use the code JOHN. New customers can get a no-sweat bet up to $1,000 if your first bet loses. Only on DraftKings Sportsbook with code JOHN. The crown is yours. Question for the bag. Love the combine stuff. Introduce your podcast to my friend, and now he's sending me your podcast before I get a chance to listen to them. My question is, why do teams come out and say, we're going to trade this guy, and if we don't get anything, we're going to cut him? If the player is going to hit the open market, why would a team give up draft capital? Because I'm trying to think of an example. It happens a lot with older players. If I have veteran X who's been to a couple Pro Bowls, but now he's older, and I go, listen, we're going to cut this guy in a couple days. If you want to get your hands on this guy, we'll just give him to you for like a 7th round pick. And maybe that team, because the moment that guy gets cut, every team in the league has a chance to talk to him, has a chance to bring him into their facility, has a chance to offer them a contract. Where if you have a guy that you like and you're comfortable paying what he's making, you go, well, shit, I'll just give you a 6th round pick. And then I get the player on my team, and I don't have to worry about, like, maybe it's a 20% chance that I even land the guy once he's available. So I think a lot of it's that. It's why you see a lot of guys during training camp get traded for 6th and 7th round picks. That team knows the other team was going to cut the guy, but they wanted that guy. And they knew that either the waiver claim or if the guy hit the open market, that they might not get the guy. So I think that's a big reason that those type things play out. This Mike Evans contract got me thinking about Tyreek's decision to go to Miami and Adams' decision to leave Green Bay. I think players of their pedigree should have taken a hometown discount. Weren't they offered similar contracts, just lesser guaranteed? Now look at the teams they left behind that are flourishing with promising quarterbacks. And given the fact that their contracts are completely bogus and nowhere near the amount reported. I think a lot of times it is much more based on respect. So if you're one of those guys and you go, wait, Miami or the Raiders would offer me a contract that you're not prepared. Now, in fairness, Tyreek was simply about the money. The Dolphins offered them a contract the Chiefs didn't want to match. And they gave him whatever, 1st and a 3rd round pick. Davante Adams wanted out. And the only place he would go was the Raiders. Miami does not regret it. Tyreek has been dominant for 2 years. I think if the Raiders had a redo, they would have just said, no, we're good. They would have declined that. Because having Davante Adams in their situation does not help them. Clearly. It doesn't make sense. They didn't have a quarterback last year. He's a great player. A great receiver does not make sense if you have no quarterback. And they clearly have no quarterback. The only quarterback he's played with the Raiders, they ran him out of town immediately. And it was time with Derek. But last year, like, I don't know. I would not make one of those moves trading for a wide receiver in general. I would just draft a guy every year. I mean, how many years ago was it that, like, DK Metcalf, A.J. Brown, and Deebo Samuel happened in the 2nd round? Happens like every other year. All these good receivers. Puka Nacua, what round he going? I always hated golf. Then you and Colin started talking about the Saudi tour, whatever it's called. It's called Live. A picture of John Daly popped up in my feed, and now this, which I trace back to you. I guess I like golf now. Can you explain why O-linemen seem like the most fun guys on the team? and why they also appear to be the most relatable to the average fan. Skill players get most of the attention, but seem all about flash and their brand. O-line feel like a dad at cookout. Well, think about most of us in life, right? We're not the star of the show. We're not treated like royalty by our employer, by our family, by anywhere we go in life, by our friends. We're just treated like a normal human being. And I would say this, most of us, whatever company we work for, are at any moment could just be told something we don't want to hear. Offensive linemen are yelled at every single day. And their job is to literally protect the highest paid guy in the billion-dollar sport. That's their job. Yet they're yelled at way more than the guy that they're paid to protect. Then there's the nature of they have to work as a team. They are very dependent on the other guys right next to them, to the left and to the right. So, like most of us, we're kind of humbled often. We're very dependent on others. And most people don't talk about us. So I think there's a relatability with one, just the way they operate under the football umbrella. Wide receivers score touchdowns. Quarterbacks throw touchdowns. Defenders make tackles. Offensive linemen literally just try to push a guy left or right or backwards. And the play ends, no one even really notices. The only time they're ever noticed is when something fucks up and there's a penalty. They like to eat. I like to drink. Most of us like to eat and like to drink. They don't ever have to do these crazy diets like these position players. Most of them just tend to be relatively smart guys. Like they're just easy to talk to. I do think it's a lot the way they're coached and the way they come up. And then ultimately, once they succeed, like make it to the NFL, it's no different than when they were in high school. They make more money, but you don't get that much more credit. Like Jason Kelce is an all-time great center. And he became really famous because of what he did at the Super Bowl parade. He's got a podcast. But think how often we talk about him when we discuss the Eagles this year. Talk about the quarterback, talk about the coaches, the head coach, the coordinators, talk about the A.J. Brown situation, talk about what the hell's up with James Bradbury. Did Howie Roseman let down the team? We never talk about Jason Kelce, the player. So like, yeah, he's pretty good. They're the best, man. They really are. A lot of you guys had DM'd me about getting pictures or whatever, or just a meetup in Indy. It was hard. One, I was legitimately pretty sick. The first couple days, I was struggling. Maria sent me a little goodie bag that I was just pumping Sudafeds and Dayquils and Advils. And then the last night I was there that I did go to dinner with some buddies, scouting buddies, but it was nothing too crazy. Also, a lot of people are like, I can't wait to get your take on Brandon Staley to the Niners. Whenever that story broke, I think it was a Saturday night, Friday night, maybe Saturday, really early in the morning. I woke up to people had sent me the tweet, and all I saw is the picture of Brandon Staley. And I almost had a heart attack. I'm like, the 49ers just hired Brandon Staley to be their defensive coordinator. And then you click on it, you realize, no, he's the headliner. They hired Nick Sorensen, who is longtime Seattle assistant. He's been with the Niners for a couple years. Played defense at Virginia Tech. I think played in the NFL for a minute, but NFL defensive guy. Kyle named him the defensive coordinator. Now they hired Brandon Staley, and they don't even have a position for him. Listen, if they had hired him to be the defensive coordinator, I would have done an hour podcast on him. It's hard for me to get worked up when they just make up a position and he's a position coach, right? Like, listen, I don't think Matt Patricia's any good. When the Eagles hired him to be an assistant, like whatever, it doesn't bother me. Now, once you make him the coordinator, now you got a problem. But like everyone's hired as an assistant. Like, welcome to football. Doesn't mean anything to me. Now, if he ends up becoming the coordinator and Wally Pips this guy, then we got a problem. But like I have no opinion. I've been to a million football practices. There's a million coaches all over the place. I used to make fun of Anthony Lynn, and it's a pretty consistent theme with the Chargers. Niners hired him to be a running back coach. Like, whatever. Who cares? Brandon Staley's helping out with the linebackers. It doesn't matter. I never thought the guy was going to be unemployed. Should not have been a coordinator. And pretty clearly the market spoke. No one was going to hire him to be a coordinator. Kyle probably thought about it. Thank God he didn't do it. But I don't know much about Sorensen. Beside the longtime Pete Carroll guy, then Robert Saleh, Dan Quinn. He just hires KJ Wright, the longtime Seattle linebacker, to be an assistant coach. Kyle really likes that defense. And it gets back to his time with Dan Quinn. The simplicity of it. It also leaves a four-man front. Obviously, you have to change and adapt as the game has changed, but I think he likes that to be his base defense. Brandon Staley is a Vic Fangio 3-4 guy. God, thank God they didn't hire him. It's like, I don't have the energy to do one of these crazy podcasts, but it would have been needed. I'm telling you, when I clicked on it and saw his picture, I said, I can't, you did not just do this, Kyle. The other thing is, a lot of people were making a big deal about the Niners interested in Steve Spagnuolo. One thing I had heard, Spags relative to, like, Vic Fangio makes like $5 million. Wink Martindale last year was making like $3.5 million. Kellen Moore makes $4 million. Spags was making nowhere near that as a defensive coordinator. Do I think Kyle was interested in him? 100%. Do I think Spags and whoever's negotiating his contract, like, let's play this up a little bit? Because one thing with the Chiefs, I don't think they pay the players, but they have historically been a relatively cheap organization when it comes to scouts and non-head coaches. Even Andy's in a contract negotiation right now. Andy Reid to me is worth like $35 million. He'll end up making $15, $20 million. Whatever Andy Reid's going to be the best bargain in the league. If you told me Andy Reid got a 3-year, $60 million contract, I'm like, that's easily the best contract in the NFL. He deserves probably like a 4-year, I don't know, $150 million deal. I mean, what's Andy Reid worth? More than any player, non-quarterback. And how many quarterbacks is Andy Reid more valuable in the NFL? Probably 6, 7 guys more valuable than Andy Reid. Would you take Dak Prescott or Andy Reid? Would you take Kirk Cousins or Andy Reid? Obviously, you would take Mahomes or Lamar, some of the super high-level guys, but I think Spags got paid, and he used the leverage to get paid, rightfully so. Question for the show. How often have you criticized Adam Silver, fairly all ad, for not prioritizing the business interests of the NBA instead of letting the players run free? Since football is over, I really miss not being able to sit down on Saturday or Sunday and watch sports during the daytime. However, the NBA only schedules games at night. With exception of some of their worst teams, playing day games. That was a mistype. Why do you think they don't capitalize on weekend daytime basketball? Doesn't it make sense to put Jokic and LeBron on midday Saturday instead of at 5 p.m.? I don't think it does. I don't pretend to be a television executive here, but football is programmed to be played Saturday and Sunday. We know Michigan, Ohio State might kick off 9 o'clock Pacific Standard Time. The Chiefs play the Broncos at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, right? The Cowboys and the Eagles kick off at 1 o'clock. Niners, Rams. It's ingrained in you. In basketball, it is kind of a nighttime sport. A lot like baseball during the week. Like, not as many day games unless you're the Cubs. I think there's a lot of just muscle memory to that. I think the ratings would be a lot lower. If you put the Lakers and that Nuggets game, instead of being at 5:30 at night, I'll give you an example. I watched the second half because I was like, I think Jokic, as just a basketball historian of my 39 years of life, and it grew up in the 90s on a lot of bigs, I think he's one of the best players I've ever seen. And I think in his era, if someone that talks a lot of shit about the NBA, I still love like some of the elite players. And I think Jokic is one of the more fun players I've ever seen play basketball. LeBron and Steph are clearly the two best players of the last like 15 years. Not even debatable. And then I think the other guy that would be in that category would be Kevin Durant. I think you could make the argument that Jokic is a better player than Durant. And if you could get them both from scratch, like 22 years old, for the next 15 years, you would rather have Jokic. I think what sucks is the league is so small now. It's small, like power forwards or the centers. It's a different sport than what I grew up on when bigs reigned supreme. It would have been awesome to see that guy in the league against Shaq, David Robinson, Akeem Olajuwon, Alonzo Mourning, Dikembe Mutombo, just all the centers of the 90s, and to just see what he would look like against them. He just eviscerates everybody. They don't have a shot. None. Even Draymond said on his pod, like, I had no shot. And he shouldn't. Draymond's like 6'5". Anthony Davis, who's 6'11's got no shot. No one has any shot. He can go 35, 10, and 10 with his fucking eyes closed. The Lakers are big, and they got he annihilated them when he needed to. But I don't think the day games would help. I think they would hurt. And that's why they don't do it. I miss some football sometimes. I guess I just like to watch like Michigan, Penn State, or just, Kansas City, Buffalo, or Buffalo, Miami. I would just like a game, and you just miss it. I've been gambling a lot on golf, a lot. I've actually been winning because I've been live betting. Love your stuff, especially the perspective on the business of the league. I'm a third generation to work in my family's insurance business. As I've gotten into management, I've always used things I've picked up from the pod in my office. Do you have any suggestions on motivating older employees? I am obsessed with everything about business, policy, wording, coverages, closing deals, but it can be impossible to get a 50-something to buy in to the same level. Any insight would be appreciated. I heard Gary Vee say this a long time ago, and I think about this a lot. If it's your business or your family's business, you can never expect, regardless of their age, for them to have this. They don't have the same skin in the game as you. So you can't expect them to work as hard as you, or even be open to the ideas that you're willing to be open to, because it might make you more money. Now, obviously, older people are less likely to change their ways, right? I think you just got to be nice to them and try to incentivize them. I've realized as I got older, I'm very incentivized. Like I said, money does not make me feel any different, but I am incentivized. Oh, the better we do here, the more money we're going to make. So I don't know, maybe the idea, if he implements it, maybe he gets $1,000 bonus, or I'm just throwing shit out there. Like, let's face it. Money usually incentivizes whether you're 60 years old or whether you're 20 years old. Some things, no matter how much the wackos in this world want to change society, I don't think much has changed the way we're wired. Like, most of us have the same basic needs and wants, right? We always want a little more money. We always want to be paid a little more. We always want our families to be happy and safe. And we always want, enough resources to feed our family. I mean, there are some basic things that will never change. So that 50-year-old, just like a 20-year-old, will have similar basic wants and desires. Now, they're different if the one person has a family, one person doesn't, one person has a mortgage, one person doesn't. I think most people like more money. So if you can find a way to add just a little more money, if it's really something that means a lot to you, if it's just some basic ideas and having them change, like, I would say this. I know a lot of people, a lot of friends and family that are part of small businesses. They all complain about that. It's hard to get people to change. So you're clearly not alone. I just think psychologically, it's why so many coaches or business leaders that study psychology, I think, tend to be a little more successful. Because I think the natural reaction, I mean, what I grew up on is you want him to do it like around my dad and the people he worked for. It's like you just fucking scream at him. You just yell at him. You wanted me to do my homework, you start screaming at me. You start making threats. I actually get offended sometimes, like, this new age of parenting. I'm not a parent yet. Obviously, they're a lot nicer to children now. It almost says like the way we were parented, which was not easy, right? And I think, I don't know if beatings is the right way to put it, but just, you had to be careful. Like, you would get it. And a lot of times deserved. It was like the wrong way. Like, we just grew up really screwed up. Like, I don't think there's a right or wrong way to parent. there are obviously right things to support your child and, push them toward education and learning and, being inquisitive. And obviously there's some things that are pretty consistent, but like most people don't know what the hell they're doing. But like this notion that like, if you felt threatened by your family, like, yeah, it kind of worked for me. Keeps me on my toes to this day. My dad's long gone. I'm still like, make sure I'm early. Because I know if I wasn't early back in the fucking early 90s, my ass was in trouble. Long way of saying I think tactics have changed, but I think the ultimate message will never change of what people want. Just my 2 cents. Okay, last question. I have a mailbag question for you involving Brandon Staley. What the fuck are the Niners doing hiring him and bringing him near that operation? I think it's a huge mistake to hire this guy as the assistant head coach when he obviously has no feel, at least last year, for even the defensive side of the football. Knowing how highly you think of the Niners and their operation, what's your opinion on this? I do think a lot of times titles in football are a giant fugazi. They're to get guys paid more, right? You see this a lot with like co-coordinators. No, one guy's calling the plays. Assistant head coach. What does that mean? Like Kyle's going to listen to Brandon Staley in terms of like, hey, Kyle, with the Chargers, this is when I like to go for it. You think Kyle's more likely to go for it? I think it's a way. Kyle's very, very close with Brandon Staley's agent, Richmond Flowers, who played with Kyle at Duke and who worked with him in Washington. Let's face it, Brandon Staley is a laughingstock, just like a lot of coaches have been laughingstocks throughout my life. You need people to throw you a bone. I have no problem anyone hiring Brandon Staley. Jim Tom Sula was hired, right? A lot of guys that we've laughed at have been hired as assistant coaches. To me, if he had been named the defensive coordinator, would have had a major problem with it. But some made up title, like what's he doing? Who's he coaching? Would I name my assistant head coach? I would not. But I've been around long enough to know, like, what does that even mean? It's one thing if you're a first-time head coach and you hire, some older coach to play that role to help you out. Like, yeah, kind of needed. Sean McVay, 31, gets the job, hires Wade Phillips. Kyle's not looking to Brandon Staley for advice, right? He's just like, help out the defensive staff with some ideas. You're not calling the plays, though. If he ever calls the plays, then we got a problem. If Kyle starts going for it in crazy fourth down situations, then we got a problem. But a title, like, who cares?